Welcome to the American Association of Critical Care Nurses Voices in Nursing podcast, exploring critical care nursing through meaningful and inspiring conversations. This episode is sponsored by AACN's award-winning online leadership course, Fundamental Skills for Nurse Managers, with information available at www.aacn.org/manager skills. Now, here are your hosts, AACN's Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Vicki Good, and Clinical Practice Specialist, Andrea Schmidt.
Welcome to the Voices in Nursing podcast. This is Dr. Vicki Good, AACN's Chief Clinical Officer, and I am joined by my co-host, Andrea Schmidt, one of AACN's Clinical Practice Specialists.
Hi, welcome to today's episode.
Today's episode is especially meaningful as we introduce AACN's 2026-27 President Tonka Williams. At AACN, the presidential theme is more than a message. It's a unifying call to action for our community. Each year, it reflects both the moment we are as a profession and the future that we are trying to create together. These themes have challenged us, inspired us, and guided us, reminding us of who we are and what we stand for as nurses. The theme also reflects a deep commitment of those who step into this role. Serving as AACN's president is not just a position, it's a year dedicated to listening, amplifying the voices of others, and shaping a vision that connects nurses across every setting, every role, and every stage of their journey.
And this year, that vision is coming from a leader whose voice is grounded in lived experience, authenticity, and a deep belief in the power of belonging. Tonka Williams brings to her presidency a message that is both personal and powerful, one that began long before her career in nursing, shaped by spaces where voices were heard, stories were shared, and people were invited to the table. Tonka, welcome to Voices in Nursing. We are so glad you're here, and we're excited for our listeners to get to know you and the vision behind this important theme. So Tonka, will you take a few minutes to highlight your nursing career for our listeners?
Yeah, I have been a nurse for over 20 some years in progressive care and some critical care. I started just all nurses have. Started at the bedside and just worked my way up into becoming an educator, a nursing leader with a nurse manager, nursing director. But one of the things that really ground me is really going back to the bedside and being amongst the nurses, listening to what's going on. So I find myself when I'm here at work, I'm currently the senior nursing director at bedside Washington Hospital Center. I find myself wearing scrubs because I like to walk onto the units and really talk to the nurses and understand what's really, really going on. So although I wear many titles and have over 2 decades of nursing experiences, I am still a bedside nurse who is listening to what's going on at the bedside with our patients and our families, and really making sure that the voice of the nurse is heard at many levels at different tables.
And Tonka, your story really begins long before nursing, and with a lot of vivid childhood memories. And I think we have that similarity, especially as you start to describe that journey that you had growing up. But the kitchen table was a central focus of many of those childhood memories. And I remember that. I guess it's a Midwest and a Southern thing that you always want to be around the kitchen table. So can you share what that environment really taught you about belonging and voice?
Yeah, when I think about when I first learned about voice and belonging, I don't remember it being found at a classroom or any type of leadership classroom settings or programs that I attended. I think about my mother's kitchen table. It was in the 1970s, small kitchen, but it was one of the greatest classrooms I have ever had. I remember being around the table with many chairs, sliding across the floor where my mother was cooking, and it was always family gatherings, with my aunts, my cousins, neighbors, and some friends that would come over. There were different opinions, of course, different personalities, different life experiences. There was so much laughter, Vicki. And there were disagreements and there was storytelling and there was wisdom. But what stood out to me the most as a little girl was that everyone had a voice. People didn't have to agree to belong. They didn't have to look the same. They didn't look alike or come from the same lived experience. But everyone's experience was valued. They were welcome because their perspectives really mattered. I didn't realize it at the time, but that kitchen table was teaching me one of my first leadership lessons, which was belonging is created when people feel safe enough to bring their whole selves. And voice is created when people know someone is willing to listen. That lesson has followed me throughout my whole entire nursing career because, with healthcare tables, there are many tables everywhere. You have patient room tables, you have nursing station, boardrooms, classrooms. And the question isn't whether people are sitting at the table. The question really is, do they feel heard when they are there? And that's where my presidential theme, every voice, every story, every table, was truly born. It wasn't created in the boardroom. It was shaped around my mother's kitchen table, where I first learned that every person has a story, every perspective was valued, and every voice deserved a place.
I think your mom did a great job of creating an environment of psychological safety so that everybody could bring their voice to that table regardless. I think it's wonderful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's also interesting thinking about, tables is I think one thing that I have to focus on a lot when I talk about the AACN voice is the fact that when we are at those tables, how do you have that respectful dialogue and stay in dialogue around the table and, not isolate as well. So there's so much that we can unpack from this. So Andrea, let's keep going.
Yeah, so Tonka, I would love, and I think our audience would too, is to know a little bit about you as a person. So, what does an average day for you look like? Of course, pre-presidency. I don't know what it looks like now, but um, curious about that first, and what your life is like, or what your day looks like.
Oh my goodness. Well, before the presidency started, I would say my days were really probably like any other nurse's days. Busy, full, sometimes a little chaotic. Well, hold up. Actually, very chaotic. I would call it probably a organized, chaotic day. You know, I'm a early riser. If you know me, I love, love, love going to Orange Theory Fitness, or in other words, OTF classes.
Mm.
That's where my reset button starts, is where I'm able to clear my mind before the day begins. There's something about starting the day with movement to get my body moving, it's giving me energy, especially knowing the days ahead where I am involved with lots of decision making and people are depending on me. Outside of my work, my greatest joy is my family. I'm a proud mom of two incredible daughters. One is in college, she's actually a junior, and I'm still learning to navigate, being a college mom and a mom of an adult child as well too.
Mm-hmm.
And my younger daughter, she's in high school, and she keeps me busy as a swim mom. There are practices, there are swim meets, there are long drives, and cheering from the stands. All the things that parents do. Oh, and also I have to keep abundance of Swedish fish with me, especially after those practices. But those moments remind me that some of the life greatest leadership lessons actually happens outside of work. People often ask me, how do I balance it all? And the truth is, some days I do it well, and some days I'm just trying to keep all the plates spinning. But my family keeps me grounded, and they remind me of what's important. And what's really important is building those relationships. Relationships matters the most. And at the end of the day, I am just Tonka. I love to laugh. I love to spend time with family. I love to travel when I can. I also love to cook, but I find joy in everyday moments. And those are the things that keep me connected to who I am.
And I think that's so important because I think when people see you achieve the presidency, they think, oh, you're this totally different person. And at the end of the day, you're not. I remember when I came off the stage, the first thing my child said to me, my son, because he was like in middle school, he's like, Mom, I'm hungry. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to find somebody else to feed you. But at the end of the day, I was still mom. It was like, Mom, I'm hungry. Come feed me. So, it is true. We're still normal people that
Yeah.
deal with normal stuff. So,
Yes, we definitely are.
one thing when I've been talking to you, you've described voice as not speaking up, but as noticing, questioning, and acting early.
Mhm.
So, how did your bedside experiences shape that definition of voice?
I think acute and critical care nurses, we understand something that the rest of the world doesn't always get to see. We often think a voice is the person speaking the loudest in the room, but at the bedside, voice is rarely loud. Voice is the nurse who's quietly saying something doesn't feel right. It's noticing that blood pressure that's slowly trending downwards and before anyone else sees it. It's recognizing those subtle changes, especially like mental status before the monitor sounds off. It's that instinct that's born from our knowledge and our experiences and being present. And that whisper that we often hear is, to say, pay attention. So some of the most life-saving moments I have witnessed didn't begin with like flashlights or any type of dramatic intervention. It actually began when a nurse noticed what others had not. So that's what the years at the bedside really taught me. It taught me that my voice isn't just what we say, it's what we notice. It's being curious, but before the certainty comes in, it's that clinical judgment before there's like proof. And it's asking that one more question. It's basically saying, voice is trusting our expertise enough to say, I know what I'm seeing and we need to act. I believe that acute and critical care nurses, we have experienced those moments, that quiet intersection where knowledge, instincts, and courage come together on behalf of the patient. That's why every voice means so much to me. It's not about encouraging nurses to find their voice, because they already have it. It's our responsibility as leaders to build a culture where that voice is heard, is trusted, and is acted upon. Because sometimes the most powerful voice in healthcare, like I said, isn't the loudest. It's the one that quietly speaks up before anyone else realizes a life is about to change. And that's what I have found out the years of my bedside.
As a leader, I think I often look at the fact that sometimes the quietest voice in the room
Mhm.
has sometimes the most meaningful message that needs to be heard.
Yeah.
And so, how do we draw out every single voice to develop that collective picture?
Mhm. There have been moments where, it can be a chaotic code or a chaotic situation in the room. And I think honestly, we have to find that person to say, let's stop, let's pause. The one that's quiet, let's hear what you have to say. And it's sometimes just giving them permission and to let them know that they do deserve to speak. They don't have to wait for someone else to tell them, hey, it's your turn to speak. We have to give them that confidence, that level of belief that their voice is honored. We trust their judgment. It's okay if we make a mistake. We have to own that. It's all right. But it's giving them that permission that we need to hear from you, because they are just as important as the person who is the loudest or the person who is running back and forth. It is giving them that permission.
I really like that because I've been in, many, many codes in my career. And I think sometimes, those that are quiet they're processing or they're thinking. But I think sometimes I don't want to say pushed to the background a little bit, but they can be with the loud voices, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned giving somebody the confidence and the permission. And I think that helps because it helps to overcome that feeling of maybe I'm not good enough to speak up, or maybe I don't know enough to speak up. And so I like that thought of, taking a pause and hearing what everybody has to say, because, you're right. Sometimes the quiet ones in the room have the answers because they're deep thinking. I do like that very much. And to piggyback onto that, was there something specific in your journey, a defining moment where you really realized that this concept is so important?
There has been many moments that shaped my voice, but one that stands above the rest, it really happened early in my nursing career. Like so many new nurses, I wasn't sure if I belonged. I walked into rooms where, I was wondering if I had to earn my place there. I was hesitant to ask questions because I didn't want to be seen as, an unprepared nurse, or didn't know questioned what my thoughts and my thinking, my expertise was. I often felt like everyone else had the confidence and I was still trying to find mine. But what seemed like any ordinary day at work was one of the most defining moments of my life. It was a time where I would just walk in onto a nursing unit and my home unit. And this particular nurse, her name was Nurse Emma. She was a LPN. She wasn't my manager. She wasn't a famous leader. She didn't give me like any lectures or, hand me a textbook or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But she saw me, and what she ended up doing, she said, "Come sit, Tonka." And so that's what I ended up doing. And she pulled up a chair right beside me, not across from me, but right beside me. I remember just like it was yesterday, 2 decades ago, she looked at me in my eyes and said 7 words that I have never forgotten. And they were, "Tonka, you belong here, not someday, today." In that moment, I feel the chills on my arms right now, because in that moment, I felt something shift. She saw something in me long before I saw it in myself. And those words didn't just give me confidence, they gave me permission to believe that I deserve a seat at a table, that my voice mattered, and that I had something meaningful to contribute. So I have come to realize that when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself, it can change your entire trajectory of your life. And that's exactly what Nurse Emma did for me. Years later, through every role that I have ever had, or every challenge I face, and every leadership opportunity I embrace, I have carried that moment with me. Because I would tell you, leadership is not measured by titles, credentials, or organization chart. Leadership is measured by the lives we touch. I feel like it's measured by whether someone walks away from an interaction with us believing more in themselves than they did before. That's the kind of leader that I strive to be. And it's why, as AACN president, I hope we can create thousands of moments just like the one that Nurse Emma created for me. And I do hope that experienced nurses become someone's Nurse Emma. I hope we notice the person standing quietly at the edge of the room, the new grad, the nurse questioning their worth, the leader wondering if they're ready. And I hope we pull up a chair beside them and to remind them, you belong here, your voice matters, you deserve to be at this table, you deserve to be heard, and your story has the power to change nursing. So in all, I have never forgotten Nurse Emma, and the truth is, my career has been shaped by many experiences, but it was really transformed by one simple moment of human connection. One nurse, one chair, 7 words, and a belief in me that became the foundation for everything I follow.
It's
And I
amazing.
love
That woman is amazing that she did that, because titles did not matter. She was a
No.
leader without the title. And I think there's so many people that don't feel that they can be a leader without the official title. But what she did was completely leadership. And I think people need more faith, that confidence that they can do that.
Absolutely. And like I said, Nurse Emma, she was an LPN at that time. And I'm just so grateful for her and to her.
Well, and I think the other aspect of that is what is critically important is that tap on the shoulder.
Yes.
And, how often do we tap people on the shoulder and say, I see something in you, let me help you, let me walk beside you to, accomplish these things, versus it constantly being a competition that we're all in. And it
Yes.
shouldn't be that.
Absolutely.
So the presidential theme really provides our organization, AACN, with a grounding for the year. The theme is, I kind of consider it a rally cry for all of us, to move forward to, but it's also particularly meaningful for the president. And yours, every voice, every story, every table is both simple, but it's really deeply layered. And so, what does the theme mean to you personally?
Yes, I tell you, this theme is deeply personal to me because I have lived every part of it. I experienced what it feels like when your voice goes unheard. I experienced the failure, the med surge I talked about, but that was only one failure. And the question whether I truly belonged. I experienced life-changing impact of someone making room for me at the table, and when I wasn't sure I deserved a seat. And over time, I've come to realize that those moments and those experiences are not really unique to me. There's stories of nurses everywhere. There are stories of new grads afraid to speaking up, seasoned nurses wondering if anyone still sees their value, leaders carrying the weight of responsibilities while quietly battling self-doubt. Different stories, different journeys, but often the same question comes up. Do I matter? Am I enough? And do I belong here? So that reality was never clearer to me than at my keynote at NTI. As nurses approached me, afterwards to talk to me, I had a line, but there was one sentence I heard over and over and over again. Not that it was a great speech or not that I loved your keynote. It was, I saw myself in your story. Yet that have stayed with me ever since. Because what those nurses were telling me and what was they really saying is that I felt seen. They weren't connected to the presentation. they were connecting to a shared human experience. They saw their own setbacks, their own resilience, their own moments of self-doubt, growth, courage, perseverance reflected in their stories that I shared. And in that moment, I realized something that was very profound. The story was never mine alone. It belonged to the new grad afraid to speaking up, the experienced nurse wondering if anyone still sees them, sees their value. You know, the leaders that carries everything. You know, that's the power of storytelling. You know, stories do inspire us all, but they connect us on a level that no data could really show us. They remind us that we are not alone. They help us see ourselves in one another. They become the bridge between the fear and courage, between isolation and belonging, between self-doubt and possibilities. But there is no greater compliment than what I heard was when they said, I saw myself in your story. And they were just rediscovering their own journeys. And that's why the presidential theme, every voice, every story, every table, is so meaningful. But at the same time, it gave every voice and permission to be heard. The stories deserve to be honored. Every nurse deserves a place, whether they feel like they belong or not, because they do belong. You know, my hope is that we create a moment where nurses don't simply listen to one another stories, but they recognize themselves in them as well. So where we make space for every voice at the table, where we have the courage to say to one another, I see you. And where more nurses can say in return, I saw myself in your story as well. That's how we change careers. I believe that's how we change nursing, and that's how we change lives. We have to do it together.
I love the idea of support and seeing each other in the story. Your, your keynote moved me deeply. It brought me to tears, to be quite honest. It was amazing. I saw myself in it as well. And I think probably our listeners who are going to hear this are going to feel the same way. And so I think, it's very clear and evident that using your voice is really about empowerment. And then obviously being in a safe place to be able to do so, and then being able to share your story. What I would like to focus on a little bit is the table portion of it.
Yes.
So what kind of tables exist in healthcare and who is still missing from those tables? That I think is something that I really want to delve into.
Yes. So every healthcare has tables. We are filled with tables. Those tables are, patient room tables, the break room tables, the conference rooms, the nursing station, boardrooms, you name it. We have tables everywhere. But I learned something really important is having a seat at the table is not the same as belonging at the table. The real question is not who has a seat. The real question is who feels empowered to speak once they're there. So are we creating tables where people simply show up, or are we creating tables where people know their perspectives is value, their experience really matters, and the voice can shape what's next? What I feel like is tables, we need to actually sit down and ask ourselves, who are we missing? Whose voice is not here to speak? Are we missing someone from our rural community? Are we missing someone who needs a different experience here? We need to be asking those type questions and invite them into a safe space for them to actually talk, to discuss, because we value that perspective. I do believe that the more perspectives that we have, the differences of opinions, the more that we can do together to take care of the patients, but most importantly, take care of ourselves as well too. So the question is, who are we inviting to the table, but who are we inspiring them to actually speak up once they're there?
So I think you are really hinting into the next question that I have is during the presidential address, you said that belonging isn't earned,
Mhm.
it's offered. And that's a really powerful statement. So, how should that shift the mindset of leaders and how leaders should show up every day?
Yeah, I believe one of the greatest misunderstandings about leadership is that leadership is about a position. I don't believe that at all. Leadership is about what happens because you are present. It's about creating the condition where people feel valued, supported, and able to bring their best selves forward. When I say belonging isn't earned, it's offered, I really mean that no one should have to prove they are worthy of being seen, heard, or included. Belonging is a gift leaders choose to give. And often it happens in the smallest moments. It's the leader who asks the new grad nurse, "What are you seeing?" It's the person who checks in after a difficult shift and says, "How are you really doing?" It's the colleague who noticed something, noticed someone standing on the side of the bed in the zone, and you ask them, "Come sit with me." It's the mentor that opens a door and says, "I think your voice belongs in this conversation. Let's come together." Those are the moments that may seem very simple, but they are never small to the person receiving them. Because in those moments, we send a message very loud and very clear when we do those that I see you, you matter, you belong here. And sometimes that one moment of intentional leadership becomes a moment that someone decides to stay, to grow, to step forward, or to believe in themselves. And that's the kind of leadership I hope we as AACN community continue to build, a leadership culture where belonging isn't something people have to fight for. It's something we create for one another every single day. Because when we as people know that we belong, we don't just show up, we contribute, we innovate, and we lead together.
I think some of the most powerful advice I was given as a leader is the most effective leader is the one that doesn't talk.
Yes. Yes. And that is me. I would tell you, I would sit quietly to listen what's going on, and then I interject at the end.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a big time introvert, and people don't believe that. And I'm like, yeah, I would just soon be at home on my couch.
Yes. Same here.
So, Tonka, to go along with the new theme,
Mhm.
many of our listeners know that every year we have artwork that goes with it. But this year's artwork is expressed differently visually than previous. What inspired that change? And how is this theme represented in this deeper message that you've got about inclusion and belonging and diverse perspectives, etc.?
Yes. So I would tell you, picking a theme was one of the, I wouldn't say the hardest decision, but it was one of the ones that I wanted to make sure that it was about the individual who happens to be a nurse. And I wanted to not only the theme to read on paper, I wanted people to actually see it and live it on a day-to-day basis. And I would say the mosaic became that visual heartbeat of every voice, every story, every table. When you first see it from a distance, you see that one beautiful image. But when you move closer, something extraordinary really happens. But I would tell you, when that revealing was happening and I was speaking to the audience, I wanted them to not only see thousands of faces or see thousands of stories or thousands of moments and of compassion, courage, and commitment. I wanted them to really see themselves in it, not a photograph of an individual person of themselves, but I wanted for them to really embrace the whole visual art. That's what makes the mosaic so powerful. It is all of us, all of our experiences, all of our perspectives, all of our voices coming together that creates that one beautiful mosaic together. So when I did reveal it at NTI and invite nurses to look closely and define themselves, I was actually glancing in the audience and I can see people like really like embracing it. And I just knew, I had my heart was just beating because I felt like they see it. They actually saw it. They saw something that, I was asking them to see their place in something bigger and to understand that, they are a part of this. Their story matters. Their voice belongs here. And without them, this picture would never be complete. So I think that's why the mosaic resonated so deeply. It's because every nurse now knows what it feels like to wonder, does my contributions really make a difference? Yes, it does. And it was the answer right in front of them. So it was nice to see that reveal and for them to actually say, this is me. I am every voice. I am every story. And I am at every table. That together we create this picture together.
I think your speech will empower people to try to do this in their organizations. That would be our best hope out there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So before we close, I do want to highlight some very powerful work you've been engaged in. Aside from your family, there was a really special person in the audience during your speech that most people didn't realize. So tell us a little bit about your work with the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so grateful for this. My work with the John Ritter Foundation for Aortic Health has become one of the most meaningful parts of my journey because it sits at the intersection of two things that I care deeply about, health equity and the power of education. My doctoral work project was really focusing on improving awareness of aortic health disease within the Black communities, but where significant disparities exist and where awareness can truly be the difference between a life saved and a life lost. So one of the most meaningful moments in that journey was meeting Amy Yazbek at our NTI in Denver in 2024 during a chapter president's luncheon actually. Amy Yazbek is the wife of the late John Ritter. And some of you may know John Ritter, who played Jack Tripper in Three's Company. Him and Amy actually met on filming Problem Child. And so Amy and I have really connected over the last couple years together, where I am actually partnering with a lot with the John Ritter Foundation. But what struck me about Amy was not only the work that she was doing through the John Ritter Foundation as the founder, but the purpose behind it. She transformed an unimaginable personal loss into a mission to educate others and raise awareness and prevent families from experiencing the same heartbreak that she did with John. So that kind of commitment is powerful. And it reminded me that sometimes our deepest pain can become one of our greatest purpose when we choose to use our experiences to help others out. So through our partnership, we work to expand awareness through community outreach, social media, education, and we did do a lot of community connections. And I would say, that has touched a lot of people within the United States and also outside of the United States. But knowledge can change outcomes. And I was so grateful that Amy was able to take some time out of her filming to come and spend some time to see me at NTI and be in the audience with you all, 6,000 plus nurses there, and for her to be rooting me on. And it was a highlight because a lot of times when Amy and I are together, people are stopping her, and this time people were stopping me, and she was filming.
A little role reversal for once.
It was.
And I'm sure Amy wouldn't have had it any other way, knowing her.
She did not.
That sounds like such an amazing experience, truly. I love what you're doing because for years before I became a critical care nurse, I worked in ER. And so in the early 90s, there was a lot of times that aortic aneurysms were missed, whether they were abdominal or they were thoracic. And it would take time for it to be recognized, without it being just, abdominal pain if they weren't hypotensive, or there were just, odd signs and symptoms. Not everyone presented the same way. And there was just such a lack of knowledge at the time. So I appreciate all of her efforts that she has put towards this. And, hopefully the care and assessments are changing and there's faster recognition.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So it has truly been an honor to welcome you to this podcast, have you as our guest, and listen to your journey. I'm so happy that you took time to share it with us today. And we are so excited to see how your year as president turns out, how it unfolds, all your opportunities and interactions with the AACN community. So we just want to thank you so much for your tireless service for acute, progressive, and critical care nurses.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been one of the highlights so far. I think today is almost going on my second week. So thank you both. I really, really enjoy talking to both of y'all and sharing my experience and my background with you too.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And we appreciate your feedback on this episode and any ideas for future episodes at podcasts@aacn.org.
Thank you for listening to the American Association of Critical Care Nurses Voices in Nursing podcast, proudly sponsored by AACN's award-winning online leadership course, Fundamental Skills for Nurse Managers, with information available at www.aacn.org/manager skills.